Greetings, and here we are at the beginning of the third year of the Russia-Ukraine war. I am Ariel Cohen. With me is my colleague Wesley Hill, and we are talking about what does the second anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war means.
I think the biggest question that I personally have, and I think it was on a lot of people's minds from the very beginning, was this expected? Did you see this coming?
I totally saw it coming because before COVID, I was traveling to Moscow a lot, and I had opportunities to discuss it in private conversations as well as on TV. I had an opportunity to discuss it with a vast number of Russian policymakers, Duma members, political scientists, retired Putin administration officials. And the level of hatred towards Ukraine and towards the West was palpable. And I was convinced that sooner or later, Russia will start hostilities at a much higher level than it started. They started in 2014, but they were not happy with the result. They were thinking in terms of changing the balance of power fundamentally. In Europe, that was connected to the December 17th, 2021 ultimatum that the Putin Kremlin provided to the West, to NATO, and to the United States. In fact, there were two documents. One was aimed at NATO and one was aimed at the United States in particular. I also do believe that the optics of our withdrawal from Afghanistan prompted Putin to make the commitment, because you don't just make a decision one day and next morning the Russian military moves. If you remember, they mobilized in March, I believe, of 2022, and after that there was a meeting in Geneva between Joe Biden and Putin, and after that meeting we had the ultimatum in December, and we had further concentration of the Russian military around the Ukrainian borders. So in January of 22, I published a piece in The Hill saying that the probability of Russian reinvasion of Ukraine is very high, and that this is not about Ukraine. I said it's about shifting the balance of power in Europe, and ergo shifting the balance of power in the world.
Well, that's very interesting, because I think a lot of people were caught flat-footed first by the invasion, but then they were caught flat-footed also by the length of time that this has continued. Did you think that this would continue for, well, over 2 years now?
No, and here I fell into the same trap as American intelligence and the Putin administration itself. I did not expect Ukraine to resist the full-scale Russian invasion. I did not expect the level of incompetence of the Russian military as they demonstrated, and with admiration, I did not expect the Ukrainian people's mobilization to fight for their freedom. I think a lot of analysts in the United States and in the world were also surprised by the ferocity of the Ukrainian resistance, as well as by the early successes of the Ukrainian military.
So tactically, it seems that the front is quite mired in a stalemate. Do you think that this is going to change anytime in the immediate future? And do you think that there might be strategic room for one side or another in the next year?
The reason the Ukrainian offensive in 2023 fizzled, and Ukraine, of course, spent tens of thousands of casualties, many killed, even more wounded. And now the reason the stalemate is tilting towards Russia, and Russia is dead set on a massive offensive in 2024, probably come spring, before or after the usual offensive of mud in the fields of Ukraine. I do believe the Russians will try a massive counteroffensive, but it all depends on Western assistance. It all depends on U.S. Congress, where appropriations are stuck. They are linked to our unfortunate situation in the southern border of the United States, but the Republicans are effectively torpedoing assistance to Ukraine and playing into the hands of Vladimir Putin. There's no way around it. Objectively speaking, we have a war that we're committed to. We are supporting one of the belligerents, Ukraine, and I do believe that U.S. being a superpower, we should be able to walk and chew gum. We should be able to deal with our border and to support Ukraine, and for that matter, to support Israel in its counter-terror operation in Gaza. And we see the stalemate of the American political system, which raises questions with our allies and encourages our adversaries at the same time to pursue aggressive foreign policy against the U.S. and against our allies.
So speaking of allies, how has European and other Western countries' support been for Ukraine in comparison to the U.S.? Is this a uniquely American failing, or is this something that the West in general needs to work on?
I think it's systemic Western failing, especially in the beginning. U.S. was leaning forward and providing equipment to Ukraine, as did others, but insufficiently so. I think one of the strategic lessons of this war is that the Western arsenals and the Western military industrial production is woefully insufficient to the challenges we're facing, not just in Ukraine, but more broadly from Russia, in the European theater, and eventually, God forbid, from China in Asia Pacific. And I do not see, with some exceptions that I'm happy to talk about, that both the United States and Europe are responding quickly to this challenge. The challenge of insufficient supply of material, of armaments. The famous case is 155 millimeter shells, artillery shells. 155 millimeter artillery shells existed since World War I, and also 122 millimeter shells. This is something that we should be able to produce quickly, and even in the industries that are not military industries, we should have contingency plans to repurpose those industrial capacities to produce these shells. But it also applies to Tomahawk missiles. In the beginning of the war in the Red Sea, U.S. Navy shot 80 Tomahawk missiles, when per year we produce something like 60 or 65. So in one day, in a couple of days, we shot out more than we produce in 1 year. Therefore, the challenge now for US, Germany, France, UK, Italy, and others in Europe, Poland, to rearrange our industrial production for the challenges of this era, which is a serious ground war in Europe and potentially wars in the Middle East and in Asia Pacific.
Why does it seem like Russia's able to overcome these challenges more easily than the U.S. and the West? I mean, Russia seems to still be trading with India. It's getting North Korean artillery shells, Iranian drones. What's going on there?
What's going on is a low-intensity world war. you are absolutely correct. I would add to the Iranian drones and missiles, North Korean missiles and shells, Chinese dual-use technologies and components, and Russia, I think, has the Soviet institutional memory. The Soviet Union was programmed to go to the war footing. It had tremendous strategic stockpiles of everything: food, raw materials, shells, tanks, you name it. Some of that is being spent in Ukraine, but at the same time, this genetic memory of mobilization, of going and having military industry working 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 3 shifts. I will remind our viewers that even in World War II, the German industry that had many redeeming qualities, engineering, innovation, all ballistic rockets and military ballistic rockets in the world were pioneered by the Germans. They were pretty much at the par, if not better, than the Allies in jet aviation, jet aircraft that flew in World War II. But at the same time, the Germans did not go to a 3-shift, 7 days a week production until 1944. And by then it was too late. Thank goodness for that. Now, the Russians reactivated their strategic planning in terms of domestic industry. They're cranking out tanks, shells, cannon, you name it. They clearly were behind in terms of drones. They're bringing an industrial production line from Iran, believe it or not, to produce the Shahed 136, known as the Russian Geran-2 loitering munition, a suicide drone. And in the last advanced Russian advance in Avdiivka in Ukraine, they reportedly had successes in dominating the skies. So this is, again, a lesson that we cannot rely on our production. We need to think forward and activate all our allies with all production. Probably countries we're not immediately thinking about, like Australia, like Spain, and others, the Netherlands, Sweden, countries that can help in this war effort, which is going to be absolutely needed unless something that I cannot see now happens that forces Russia to stop this war.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
It's a pleasure.